how North Carolina can support universal basic income. So our agenda real quick, we're going to start with the preamble of the Constitution to remind ourselves what our duties are as Americans. We're going to talk briefly about the how and why of universal basic income, the UBI legislation itself, and then our political strategy. And after each of those sections, we'll stop for questions for a few minutes. And then if anybody wants to stay after 12:30, welcome to hang out and we can talk more about it and answer more questions. With that, you're invited to, if you like, unmute and read the preamble. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Those are our responsibilities. That's our mission statement as Americans, to do those things. Our first topic today, though, is universal basic income, the how and the why. What is universal basic income? Briefly, it is also known as unconditional basic income. It is a payment made to citizens on a regular basis in the form of cash. And currently in America, we've got about 1 in 9 Americans that are living below the poverty line, which is Congress is failing to look out for the American people when 58% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Now, one of the important things about universal basic income is that it's cash. It's not a voucher for something, but it's cash that you can use to meet your basic needs. So universal basic income, there have been a number of pilot programs that have been done around the United States, around the world, and have found that it unlocks our human potential. We find that in increased trust in each other, when people know that there is a safety floor, that they're being looked out for, improves people's health. Poverty is a big driver of healthcare usage. There's a study in Wisconsin, and the doctor looked at the usage of healthcare in the poorest zip codes and found that, if we got rid of poverty, we could bring healthcare usage down by about 35%. Universal basic income will lead to a higher IQ. I've got an asterisk next to that one, because what really happens is poverty makes people dumber, that you're using mental bandwidth to try and figure out, how are you going to pay the rent? How are you going to deal with unexpected expenses? How do you put food on your table? And so it uses up that mental bandwidth. Studies have found that IQ can drop by as much as 13 points when you're under economic stress. UBI improves child development. It helps people be less stressed. This is one of the ways it improves child development, is because when people are under stress, they talk less. And one of the greatest predictors for childhood development is how much conversation you have with them as a parent, as they're growing up and learning about the world around them. And of course, reduced crime. Poverty, again, is a big driver of crime. So we'll stop there. And if anybody has any questions, you're welcome to unmute or type them in the chat about the concept of universal basic income. It's universal. It's unconditional. Everyone gets it. There's no paperwork. And it's a regular cash payment that people can use to improve their own lives. Now, Congress how do we get Congress to do these things? Should we trust Congress to suddenly wake up and start looking out for the American people? And the answer is no. Our political structure is broken. We need a different model to make it work for we the people. And so the American Union has spent the last couple of years working on model universal basic income legislation as part of a larger legislative package that would be completely universal and meet all these definitions that we laid out in a way that lifts every American up and fulfills the goal in the preamble of promoting the general welfare in the United States. So our legislative package is the blueprint for a better America. It's about 200 pages long. You can read it on our website, anamericanunion.com, or at that bit.ly link there. And it's got about 50 different policies, but universal basic income is really one of the most important ones, because our basic economic security sets the foundation for a lot of the other things that we do in our lives. And as we talked about, ending poverty addresses a lot of other issues in society. And so the universal basic income is called the American Union Jobs Program. It is not a jobs program in the traditional sense. It's not employment. There's no forms to fill out, no paperwork or anything like that. It is universal basic income. But it's a regular reminder that as Americans, we have duties, we have responsibilities, that we owe things to other people. And so universal basic income of $300 a week or $1,300 a month is a regular reminder of those duties, of our responsibilities. It's an encouragement to go out and be a better American, go out and establish justice or ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, or secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Help make America better. And everyone will get $300 a week to do that however they see fit. Now, these payments will be made in digital cash. We'll talk more about this on the next slide. And kids' payments, children's dividend will be 1/3 of what the adult rate is. If you remember Andrew Yang's campaign for president, when he was running for the 2020 nomination, he proposed the freedom dividend of $1,000 a month for adults only. He did exclude some people, but the biggest problem with his plan was that it didn't include children. And so it would have left about 5 million Americans living in poverty. And so this legislation would have a 1/3 dividend for children split between the parents, and that would be sufficient to ensure that every American family starts at the poverty line and that they can work up from there. UBI payments will be made through the U.S. Treasury. We've got millions of Americans who are outside of the banking system. A lot of the people that fall in this category overlap with the millions in poverty pretty strongly. And so the U.S. Treasury would be directed to open up a free, no-fee bank account for every American citizen. Other legal residents, businesses could open them up too if they wanted, but they would open one up. They'd be required to open one for every citizen. And universal basic income payments would be made in the form of digital assets, Treasury dollar bills. So these aren't cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, but they're digital assets in the same sense, except that they're backed by the United States government and would be pegged 1-to-1 to the value of the dollar, to Federal Reserve notes that we use today. In fact, if you wanted to exchange these Treasury dollar bills for paper money, you could go to an ATM, which U.S. post offices will have, and just withdraw your $300 a week, your $1,300 a month, withdraw it as cash and spend it as you see fit. But by having every American have a bank account with the Treasury, the U.S. Treasury, we will set up a public payment infrastructure for the United States where people can transfer money between accounts for free without those banking fees that cost Americans so much, without those credit card fees that add 1 or 2% to the price of everything. But payment infrastructure would really upgrade our economy for the 21st century. Money is almost all digital now, and so we ought to be able to spend it without having to pay a private company, a private bank for that privilege. Some of the other protections built into this legislation would be allowing citizens to anonymize their accounts, to treat their transactions like cash. And we repeat, there's several times in here that these accounts can't be blocked, can't be taken away from anyone. They are universal. This is a privilege of citizenship, that you would be guaranteed a bank account with the U.S. Treasury to participate in the American economy. Some of the questions that we often get about the Universal Basic Program is how much does it cost? And so there'd be an estimated about 250 million adults and 70 million children that would be enrolled. And so that comes out to about $4.25 trillion that would be issued in these digital assets. Now, about half of that would be clawed back through taxes. A value-added tax of 12% would be a consumption tax, so that while everybody would start at the poverty line, as you spent more and more money, some of that money would be clawed back to offset the costs of universal basic income. There would also be fees on pollution, carbon, and on plastic. The Supreme Court ruled last week that the EPA couldn't use the Clean Air Act to regulate greenhouse gases, that Congress once again has dropped the ball and is not given any specific legislative authority for regulating carbon. And so the way to do that is to put a tax on pollution and then give that money back to the American people so that everyone has an economic incentive to pollute less. And so under this plan, which is based on model legislation from the Citizens Climate Lobby, it would cut America's greenhouse gases in half over about 10 years. And then the other half of this, the $2 trillion, is these digital assets, the Treasury dollar bills that the U.S. Treasury would be introducing. So unlike our current money where we borrow a lot of money into existence, the Treasury would issue cash money directly. And so over time, that money would be able to pay down the national debt, pay off the trillions in credit card debts and student loans and things that American private citizens are carrying, and replace the money in our economy with sovereign money, where we're not paying for the privilege of having access to dollars. And to make sure that the Treasury doesn't issue too much of this digital cash, they would be restricted so that the only way new Treasury dollar bills can come into existence is by sending them to every American citizen as universal basic income. New money entering the economy, which we need as it grows and as our population grows. That's the dividend. That's the productivity. That's the growth in our economy. And so that dividend belongs to the American people. So instead of what we do now, which is introducing new money at the top of the economic ladder and hoping it trickles down, through universal basic income, we'll create a trickle-up economy that works for everyone and lifts everyone above the poverty line. We'll move on to the political strategy. Martin Luther King, before he was assassinated, 1 year before he was assassinated, he gave his Beyond Vietnam speech, and he challenged us. He said, "Our only hope today lies in our ability to recapture the revolutionary spirit and to go out into a sometimes hostile world, declaring eternal opposition to poverty, racism, and militarism. And with this powerful commitment, we shall boldly challenge the status quo." The status quo in America is broken. We've got 1 in 9 Americans living in poverty. We have millions and millions. We have 2 million Americans who wake up behind bars every single day, and many other parts of our economy that are breaking down. And yet we manage to spend nearly $1 trillion each year on our military budget. And so these 3 interconnected evils, poverty, racism, and militarism, are addressed in the larger legislative package, the Blueprint for a Better America. So the 3 main planks are to end poverty, end mass incarceration, and end the endless wars. Now, ending poverty is done primarily with universal basic income, that $1,300 a month for adults and $433 for kids, that lifts everybody up above the poverty line. The legislation also includes paid family leave. America is one of the only countries in the world that doesn't require paid time off for new mothers, and a public option for health insurance. So we talked about the American Union Jobs Program as the vehicle as the Universal Basic Income Program. And so you can get insurance through your American Union job to decouple healthcare and employment. These are 2 things that should not be related, and in too many situations, people find themselves stuck or trapped in jobs simply to keep access to their health care. And so by offering a public option for health insurance, will enable people, give them greater freedom to move around in the economy and look for different employment, or to start their own business, or to do other things. The second plank is ending mass incarceration with major police, prison, and prosecutorial reforms. It was 2 years ago that we saw George Floyd murdered, and nothing has really changed. And so this legislative package has a number of police reforms, including ending qualified immunity, restricting the use of civil asset forfeiture, restricting the use of no-knock warrants. There's also a number of prison reforms in here to help make sure that people are rehabilitated and better able to acclimate when they get back into society. And then prosecutorial reforms, including ending the federal drug war, letting states set their own policies. And then ending the endless wars involves reducing our military budget and adjusting some of our foreign policies. So these three planks are the end poverty, end mass incarceration, and end the endless wars is part of the new social contract in our legislative package. And Dr. King also said that these problems of racial injustice and economic injustice could not be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power. And as we know, universal basic income is that radical redistribution of economic power. That's why Dr. King supported a guaranteed annual income in his life, because he recognized that the poor transformed into purchasers could address a lot of these issues on their own, give people the tools and to improve their own lives, and they will. But for the radical redistribution of political power, we need a better way to influence Congress. And so the American Union is a union of swing voters. We are not a political party. We are instead leveraging our votes behind that specific legislative package, the Blueprint for a Better America. And as a union of swing voters, it just takes a small percentage to control the balance of power in the United States Congress. And so for 2022, we're focused on 10 states that have U.S. Senate seats up for grabs, including North Carolina. Within those districts, we've got about 20 competitive House seats, as well as some other competitive House races nationwide. And so the goal is a block of 3.5% of voters. And so with 3.5%, we would control the outcome of more than a half a dozen U.S. Senate seats, including North Carolina, and a dozen or more House seats. So enough to control the balance of power in Congress. And that leverage brings us to the table, lets us change the national conversation and say, look, Americans, we don't have to fight this election. Instead, we can come together around solving problems, ending poverty, ending mass incarceration, ending the endless wars. And so because the legislation is pre-written by the people, written outside the swamp of Washington, D.C., we expect Congress to put it on the president's desk before the midterm elections. If they do, they can all get our votes. Republicans, Democrats, we don't care. Just solve some problems already. And if they refuse, their challengers can win the American Union endorsement. There'll be some, if you're on our newsletter, there'll be an article coming out this week that goes into this strategy in more detail. Within North Carolina, we've got 4 House districts that are swing districts where 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats offer the opportunity of reelecting incumbents or their successors if they get this done before the election. If they refuse, then their major party challengers can steal the endorsement. But the big prize in North Carolina is the U.S. Senate seat. It's going to be a Republican or Democrat who wins this on November 8th. We don't know which one, but you just need a small percentage, about 2%, to be able to control whether it goes Republican or Democrat. And so if you look back at the vote totals for the last decade, you can see that it's very rare for anyone to win with more than 50% of the vote. You might have heard that the Green Party was just blocked from getting on the ballot this last week. And so once again, this will be a very close election. They're going to spend 2 years ago, they spent about $200 million on this Senate race. And so they'll probably spend that much or even more. They're going to spend all their time trying to persuade Republicans and Democrats to hate each other. They're going to try and persuade us that one of these 2 candidates is the worst evil possible. And so you've got to vote for the lesser of 2 evils. But instead, the American Union can be the calmer heads that prevail. We're offering very specific solutions to all the candidates in all 469 federal races: end poverty, end mass incarceration, and end the endless wars. And if these candidates will get on board, they can earn the endorsement. And so that's the American Union political strategy for implementing universal basic income and many other societal reforms. And so at this point, we'll go ahead and open things up for questions again.
Hi, I have a question. I would like to know what areas with the universal basic income start at first? Is it going to be blanket wide across the country, or is it going to be in specific areas first?
It would be a universal, it would be by citizenship. So every citizen around the country would get it no matter where they live. And $1,300 a month, obviously, if you're living in a high cost of living place like New York or LA or something like that, is not enough to meet your basic needs. But you're free to travel around the country and live wherever you want. That is the national poverty line.
Thank you for that answer. When is the next meeting?
So we're going to do this presentation again on Tuesday evening at 7. We try and give people a couple different options to see which works best for them. And then we have other meetings focusing on different parts of the legislation. So we do every couple of weeks do an hour presentation on the criminal justice reform and on the peace parts of this legislation. We have videos of those if you're interested on our YouTube channel. And we also have a 1-hour discussion group on universal basic income every other Monday night.
Thank you for your time and answering my questions and explaining your entire presentation. You have a nice day, sir.
Thank you. You as well. Put your email in the chat. I'll make sure you get that information. You can also find a lot of it on our website, AmericanUnion.com.